Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this session of GCF on climate technology and innovation. If we are to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and keep the planet safe and be on the trajectory for 1.5 pathway, technology innovation is critical. And that needs to happen where the need is most felt for developing a low emissions climate resilient pathway, which is in the developing countries. Much of the financial flows and the ecosystem for nurturing this exists very well in the developed countries and in some of the large emerging economy. How can we together, GCF, our partners, public sector as well as private, make this happen and nurture it is the topic of discussion today. My name is Kavita Sinha. I'm the Deputy Director for Mitigation and Adaptation at the GCF. We also have today, the session, like all other GCF sessions, is also being broadcast live streamed. So a very warm welcome and greetings to all our audience who are online today. Before I begin, some housekeeping rules. Please keep your masks on and maintain the social distancing in the room while you are present here. For the speakers, you may take off your masks because on the podium, the distance between the seat maintains what the code of conduct requires. So thank you very much for that. And now I will begin the formal session. I'll be the moderator today. The session is divided into two sections. The first section, we have panelists which describe our mandate from the UNFCCC on climate technology and innovation, as well as lays the baseline of what GCF is already doing and what we hope to do. For this session, I'll invite our speakers for today, Mr. Marir Mohammed Husni, the Vice Chair of the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee. Mr. Marir, please. Our second speaker, Dr. Rose Mwabaza, Director for CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network. Ma'am. And then last but not least for this session is Dr. Javier Manzarez, Deputy Executive Director of GCF. Please. We'll kick off this session with a presentation or discussion from Mr. Marir Mohammed Husni on the key role of the Technology Executive Committee from the policy angle, which gives us the mandate to do what we do and support the developing countries in their mission and aspirations to achieve a low-emission, climate-resilient development pathway. Mr. Marir, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Kavita, for that kind introduction. As introduced, I'm current Vice Chair of the Technology Executive Committee, which is one of the constituted body of the UNFCCC. I have few slides. It might be helpful if they are projected on. But nevertheless, let me begin. The work of tech was born in Cancun in 2016, where both CTCN as well as the Technology Executive Committee was born. The main aim for the Technology Executive Committee is we provide policy guidance to the process, so to ensure that is well taken up by countries or parties, and then we have a very good relations in terms of with the Climate Technology Network Center, and we always see that where tech is represented, CTCN is also represented. So here we have Rose with us as well. What we have been working based on, we have been also serving the Paris Agreement, and we have been working on the outcomes from the Paris on the technology framework as our basis. And our current work program is built on the 5 elements of the technology framework, which includes innovation is center element, I would say. With that, we have done few technology briefs. That is usually the documents that we prepare in our work, which assess kind of provides a policy angles of kind of technologies that we usually undertake. With regards to the innovation sector, recently we have done two policy brief. If the technology works, it would be have been projected. But one is focused on implementation of the Paris Agreement and what are the technologies, what are the innovations that are available on that. These includes and that technology brief provide us with the angle that innovation is critical in order to really implement the Paris Agreement, and it acts as an enhancer in that regard. And what we have found in the major findings that we found from that little piece of tech brief is there are certain institutional arrangements that needs to work together to deliver the sector of innovation. And there are some pull and push factors that are including setting up the right enabling framework or right enabling conditions within the government as well. In addition to that, there are a country, the country ownership is also critical, because without the ownership of those stakeholders, it will be difficult for any innovations to be uptaken by the stakeholders as well. In that regard, collaboration is key, I would say. But just framing the whole context of innovation in that particular policy brief, what we really have found is there is no one fit size for all. There is none. This is something that we already always hear that. So when it comes to technology, also there is no one fit size for all. There are some technologies that are viable in maybe in UK is not viable in small countries or in LDCs or major developing country as well. So technologies are very site specific, so is their innovation and their success rate as well. Then let me go to the next tech brief that we have undertaken, with focus on entrepreneurs, on what in terms of how well they are equipped to undertake this humongous task of delivering the technologies that are available through them. We found that in most of the developing countries, we see that there are lack of enabling environment, as we have found in our previous briefs, that there are key enabling environments that we require needs to be addressed as well. Maybe next slide would be helpful. And then what we also found is in some countries there is limited opportunity available for because most of the entrepreneurs come from the private sector, and there is limited opportunity in some case because of their economies and how the country is shaped in that regard as well. So we see that there are limited opportunity to engage as entrepreneurs. But we also see some of the potentials that are growing. They are innovative in nature, even though they do not have huge scalable kind of innovations that are available in those countries, but there are very I don't know how to frame it, but a limited entrepreneurs are there who produce in smaller scale for those countries' needs. And lastly, what we have found through that report is, through the tech brief, is there is always a room for improvement, and one of the room that requires a huge improvement is the element of support. That's where the GCF and the Jeff would right in jump in and help those entrepreneurs or that sector to really scale up their action. There are bright ideas within those communities, but they need some kind of I would say a seed support, both in terms of capacity as well as finance, to ensure that the technology is being boosted up. And also we did recently on climate incubators and accelerators, and we have been talking much with the Green Climate Fund on how to really implement it, and we are happy to see that there has been a huge progress in terms of achieving this goal of the technology incubators and accelerators. If you can go to the next slide, where I would be just talking about what are the forthcoming interventions that we have that we are currently doing in the Technology Executive Committee. One of the elements that we are doing is strengthening of the national innovation system. Can we go to the next slide, please?
May I use the pause to say, Dr. Murray, if you could start wrapping up as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So we are exploring setup for national information system, as well as we have identified and analyzed the international research development and deployment as well. These are also available in the TT Clear website as well. We have also compiled the country's experience and good practices and lessons learned as well. This is currently ongoing thing within the Technology Executive Committee, similar to the key emerging technologies that currently we are undertaking as well. Maybe I would leave it there, and thank you very much. I'm happy to hear questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marid, for your excellent and comprehensive policy brief on where we stand, what the limitations are, what the challenges are, and where the opportunities are. You talked about the need for building an ecosystem around to help expand and progress, and the need, of course, for financing. With that, I request Dr. Rose Mivbaza, the director of CTCN, for her perspectives on how can we support the technology, how the Technology Center and Network is supporting the development of climate innovation and technology. Dr. Rose.
Thank you very much, Kavita. It's a pleasure to see you after zooming in all the time for a while. I want to thank our colleagues at the GCF for organizing this event. In many ways, at the Climate Technology Center and Network, we feel like your cousins. I don't know if I should say sisters, because we are part of the same convention as the technology mechanism. And as Maria was saying, we are designed to be the operational arm of the technology mechanism, to actually work with the member states to deliver these technologies. So I will share with you a little bit about what we are doing and where we envision further engagements and partnerships as it is expected of us by the member states. As you know, this week, the member states are talking about technology and the work we are doing, and more importantly, linkages between the different mechanisms of the UNFCCC. And you would know they've been very keen to know how the GCF and the technology mechanism can work well together. There's lots of opportunities, and I'll tell you why. Since the last time we met in person, because we've met virtually, in Madrid at COP25, lots of things have happened in the CTCN. We've had 92 member states come to us for technical assistance to accelerate transfer of climate technology. So the demand is high, even in times of the pandemic, or maybe we shouldn't be surprised because of the pandemic, the demand is high. And to date, from the time we met at Madrid, we have a total of 361 technology transfer requests that we've accepted from member states, 107 developing countries to be precise. To give you a sense of what these requests, where these requests are coming from, 26% of these are from LDCs, 11% are from seeds, and roughly around 47% of all our requests are on mitigation, 30% are on adaptation, and the rest fall within what we call co-benefits of both mitigation and adaptation. Because of the high demand we have an advisory board made up of member states. It's provided guidance on how we determine eligibility of the technologies that we transfer to member states. And really, the focus is on those that have the greatest potential for transformational impact. And this is how that has been guided. This is how we've been guided to determine that. Those that provide a combination of both policy interventions and technological components. Those that have multi-level and long-term perspectives for strengthening both national and subnational actions. Those that put focus on sustained and long-term impact so that there's no relapse when we leave. There must be sustainability. And then to ensure that we continue the demand-drivenness that is expected. So there are no predetermined projects. We do not design projects in advance. They are all based on requests that come to us through the 161 national designated entities that were established as part of the COP. And we have facilitated a wide range of technological transfers from the member states. I'll share with you some of the interesting ones in relation to innovation that we are currently doing to give you a sense of what we are doing. We have working on what we call the Youth Climate Innovation Labs. We have over 700 young people from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And they have provided some of the most amazing innovative ideas on how to deal with climate change at local and community level. As you would know, they are very interested. They're now asking for a seat on the advisory boards of these technological mechanisms. But some of them, in fact, are so good, we were able to match them with private sector actors, and they have invested in their business enterprises based on these innovations they presented to us. As part of our innovation work, we've also worked with the Adaptation Fund, the other financing mechanism, on an adaptation accelerator. As you heard from the number of requests I told you, just around 30% are on adaptation. But in fact, we have 200 requests that are unmet from over 60 countries on adaptation acceleration. And so for the work that the GCF is doing on an acceleration, for the accelerators, we are hoping we can have another an accelerator program similar to the one we're doing with the Adaptation Fund. The response has been exponentially high, as I said, but it's also extremely transformational. I wish I had more than 5 minutes to share with you some of the work we are doing in the member states on these transformational actions. But more importantly, I think our partnership on Accelerator Labs would be fruitful because, as you know, our first foray on partnerships and readiness has been extremely successful. It's been lauded by the member states repeatedly because right now we are your largest providers of readiness support for member states, 75% to be precise. And we are being called upon by the member states to expand this partnership to other forms of projects, and so I've been meeting around trying to look for my colleagues in the GCF to explore opportunities and receive guidance from them on how really we can move this forward. To give you a sense of the types of technological transfers that countries are asking us for, because you must be wondering what it is. This year, the interesting trends are digitization. Many countries are asking us for digital technologies. And I like what the president of Malawi said in his speech. He said that for developing countries, some of the technologies that are transformational for them are actually simple technologies. They are not looking for nanotechnologies or nuclear science. A simple digital application. Unmanned aerial drones that are combined with satellite technologies that are very easy to apply will transform their agricultural sector. And that is where we play a real catalytic and transformational role as the CTCN. That kind of technology for precision farming in a country like that will bring food to 3 million people. Or solar pumps for water will bring water to entire communities, or desalinize community water wells that have been inundated by ocean waters. So it really does work. So digitization is a huge request coming in. Energy systems across the board. We have a very successful one already with the GCF, with the South African Development Corporation for 8 countries, but this is increasingly another large one. And then green hydrogen as well. We have several requests from Latin America, 3 or 4 countries in Asia, and several countries in Southern Africa and West Africa. Nature-based solutions, technologies to support nature, to protect nature, to regenerate nature are very big. In Kenya right now, we've just supported the country to develop a 10-year national agroforestry strategy that would allow the country to maintain 10% of its forestry cover. It will contribute to 50% of the country's goal of abating greenhouse gas emissions. And it would also support the reduction in the emission of 4.2 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So that's the kind of work we do. Urban systems, including e-mobility, are a large one, building efficiency. So I could give you a whole range. Going forward, as I said, it's really to explore how we can enhance that collaboration, build on the successes we have between our 2 mechanisms. And I think I will be remiss if I didn't mention that we will be opening a liaison office in Songdo with the gracious generosity of the government of the Republic of Korea. They've provided us space right opposite you, GCF. We haven't occupied it yet because of the pandemic. But really the purpose of this office is the government of Korea is responding to the COP mandate requiring better linkages between our 2 institutions. So they are providing the financial support to enable us to do that. But that office is also going to be the driver for our work on innovation and RD&D with the guidance of the Korean government. In addition to the funding they put into our trust fund, that support, just that office alone, they've put in $10 million to enable us to build those linkages. And so we are really looking forward to working with you. I'm hoping to come sometime in the first quarter of next year for us to be able to launch that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you for that excellent and very comprehensive view from the grounds up on what the demand is for the technologies. And I'm glad to say, as GCF, we aren't far off track. Our partners who will speak in the next session hopefully will highlight some of the areas in which we're working and how they match with the demand coming from the field. But a lot needs to be done, as you rightly pointed out. And welcome to our new neighbors. Songdo is a pretty small place. We like new neighbors. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic now to Dr. Javier Almanzar-Nares, the Deputy Executive Director, and what GCF is doing in supporting for climate innovation and technology and our full cycle approach towards that. Dr. Almanzar-Nares, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Kavita, for the introduction. Great pleasure to be here. And as you can see, this is pretty much what the GCF is about. CTCN, tech, private sector. We have representation from international organizations, GIGA. So this is convening all the players, and that's what the GCF wants to do. I will try to go straight to the points so that Kavita doesn't get upset because we are going over the time. And that's the question in essence, is the GCF walking the talk, right? And in terms of climate finance towards innovation and technology. We have, as of October, we did a mapping out of our portfolio. and 60%, at least 60% of our portfolio had clear components of innovation and technology. Does it mean that we are truly walking the talk? Well, there is a COP guidance that clearly states to the GCF board that is also important to facilitate access, financing to startups. And for that, the GCF, the Secretariat has put together the terms of reference for RFP towards breakthrough climate technology accelerators and incubators. We are proposing this to be considered by the board, obviously, but we are proposing to open a window of up to $150, $180 million dedicated exclusively to that. And I'm very grateful to CTCN and Tech because they have both contributed very much on the design of this RFP, and hopefully our accredited entities and delivery partners will engage with the GCF in moving forward. Yes, I will not bore you with figures, but the IPCC estimates that from 1.6 to $3.8 trillion in new climate investments are needed annually through 2050 to limit warming below 1.5. A few more numbers that have been published recently. During 2021, the estimation is that $32 billion will be dedicated to innovation and technology investments in startup. This is 4 times the amount that was invested in 2016. And when you hear BlackRock, Larry Fink saying very recently that the next 1 trillion investments in innovation and technology will be on climate technology. So the momentum is there. And I think players like the GCF should do everything that it takes to truly mobilize and crowd in the private sector. We'll move now with a little bit of a context on the UNFCCC. I'll give you some examples on what we're doing under the readiness program. We'll give you some also examples on what the GCF is doing in terms of climate finance for innovation and technology. And then we'll hear directly from the sponsors, from fund managers, from our partners. So the board of the GCF has always strongly encouraged the Secretariat to work closely with the UNFCCC, Tech and CTCN, and I think this is the outcome of this close work. Again, pleasure to have Maria and Rose with us today. Organizations like the GCF and our partners in attendance today must use their concessional funds to mobilize significantly more resources for the private sector by taking on more risk from the GCF, providing capacity building support, and helping policymakers creating enabling environment. Those 2 examples on the readiness, I'll go through them quickly. Myanmar. In Myanmar, we are partnering with UNEP and CTCN to explore options for using a web-based information portal that uses satellite data to support more conventional river basin management operations, which is also an area of weaknesses within Myanmar. The other example is Tonga. In Tonga, we are also partnering with the UNEP and CTCN to support the development of a Tonga Energy Efficiency Master Plan with achievable energy efficiency and greenhouse targets to ensure the transition to an energy-efficient future for Tonga. Now, in terms of funding proposals, with Acumen, one of our partners, we have created a new investment fund that is called Kawasafi, using GCF funding to drive off-grid solar power in East Africa. We'll move to the next case with EBRD.
EBRD and the GCF are partnering to co-finance a program to deliver climate finance to the private sector at scale through partner financial institutions across 10 countries. The facility is called the Green Economy Financial Facilities, and this is an on-lending program that will provide credit lines to PFIs. Another example is with Tanzania, with our partner in Tanzania, the CRBB. The GCF has recently approved a $200 million program to create a lending and de-risking facility to finance adaptation technologies for agricultural enterprises with an emphasis on smallholders, farmers, and MSMEs. A next example, and this one in collaboration with the accredited entity Pegasus Capital Advisors and the fund manager, the Lightsmith Group, Craft. We are delighted to have with us this CEO of Lightsmith. In this occasion, the fund has been designed to invest in and scaling up in adaptation solutions for developing countries that have a combination of climate vulnerabilities and enabling environment for private investments. Thank you very much, Jacob, for being with us today, and hopefully you will give us more insights into this excellent fund. We're moving now with another example. The GCF has recently approved a project preparation facility with the Korean Development Bank with an amount of $1.2 million. The program aims to support entrepreneurs with climate technology-enabled solutions that will accelerate the low carbon and climate resilient transitions across Southeast Asia. I'm talking about countries like Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, and the Philippines. We're also very pleased to have with us KDB and to have the CEO of GIGA, Frank. Thank you very much for being with us today, and hopefully you will also walk us through your support to climate technologies and innovation. And as to set the stage for today's discussion, I would like to share with you the findings of PwC in the report, the state of climate technology. According to the report, there are 4 types of the fundamentals barriers we need to overcome, and they include technological barriers, financial, policy, and people barriers. The same report identified 3 key overarching recommendations to scale up the climate tech ecosystem. They include funding the early stage life cycle of climate technology companies, number 1. Number 2, develop more talent to climate technology. Number 3, enhance policy and financial incentive for climate technology. And with this, I really look forward to hear for our next panel through all of these barriers and recommendations. Thank you very much, Kavita.
Thank you, Javier, for a very comprehensive view of what GCF is doing and what our partners are doing with us for that. A very good preview of some of the speakers in the next sessions. Thanks for that, Javier. Before I close this session, maybe I will just have one 30-second reaction from each of our panelists here on what is your call for action for this collaboration between the 2 mechanisms of the UNFCCC, the CTCN and TEC as the technology mechanism and us as the finance mechanism, your call for action on how we can do better in 2022. Marie, first to you.
Thank you. It's very difficult to give in 30 seconds. The COP has mandated us to work very closely together, and Javier just mentioned in his presentation about the barriers that was identified. We have also identified similar barriers, and so we all understand what are the challenges that are here. in terms of how to do the innovation. And currently, GCF is also calling for the request for proposal for accelerators and incubators. So that would be an opportunity for the two financial mechanism as well as the technology mechanism to collaborate more to enable this seed support that is required for the greater opportunities that are available to make the butterfly effect, if I can say that, on technology. Maybe I would leave it there. My 30 seconds is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie, for that. Rose, over to you.
What I would say is that it's really scaling up. We know yesterday we were launching the Adaptation Gap report with Alok Sharma and Inga Anderson, our boss, and the Deputy Director of the UNFCCC. And the gap is huge. But we also know the technologies that are needed to actually stem what we've called a gathering storm in UNEP are available. It's one of those areas, in fact, where the technologies are available, and your accelerator lab would do that. But we know that something from the Mission Gaps report and the IPCC, all of which are produced under the tutelage of UNEP and IOM and the other partners. So it is really about scaling up and rising to the occasion. As I said, I know that supporting developing countries, a lot of what we need for the transformative action based on their NDCs are technologies that we have, because they are the simple ones that allow transformation. And the resources we have can actually allow us to do that.
Thank you. Really excellent point. Javier, last word on this topic.
GCF, we need a lot more technical expert advice. My take is please take CTC and engage more and more often with the GCF. The more the merrier. That's how it would help us out to deliver with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had an excellent discussion. The scene's now been set to talk about the case studies. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to our panelists here. Thank you so very much. Mr. Marie, Rose, Javier, thank you so very much. For the next session, which is a session on case studies from our partners, executing entities, delivery partners, and our AEs on what actually is being done and delivered, we have two speakers here who are present with us in person, taking advantage of the COP. Two are joining us in virtually, sort of talking to us about what environment still exists due to COVID. So great pleasure. I want to welcome Mr. Jay Ko, Managing Director of the Lightsmith Group, to join me, and Dr. Frank Riesberman, the Director General from GGGI, to join me. We're also joined virtually by Mr. Wuksan Ang, the Global Head of Climate Business in the Korean Development Bank, and by Ms. Ramala Musuya, the Direct Manager for Strategic Affairs at the CRDB Bank, who's our from Tanzania, who's our DAE partner. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a big round of applause to our new speakers here. To keep it interesting and see whether technology actually works, very befitting for the session on climate technology and innovation, we will start off with a virtual presentation by Mr. Wuksan Ang, the Global Head of Climate Business at the Korea Development Bank. He will be joining us via Zoom. Can we have him on, please? If Mr. Wuksanan is having difficulty joining, we may want to move on to the next speaker and come back to him again. All right, let's move then to Dr. Frank Riesberman, the Director General of GGGI, as the first speaker, and we'll come back to Mr. Wuksanan shortly after his speech.
Thank you.
Frank.
Thank you, Kavita. So yes, GGI is a young intergovernmental organization, also headquartered in Korea. Small office in Songdo, it's G Tower, but our primary headquarters is in Seoul. There we have about 20% of our staff, of about 500 people who work for us. The other 80% actually are working in over 30 developing countries. So we're mostly field-based, supporting the green transition for our 41 member states and helping them with policies and then with investment projects. We've recognized the importance of innovation, both to implement climate action and a green transition, but also for employment. A very large share of employment, of jobs, of green jobs, comes from small and medium enterprises, is generated by these entrepreneurs that we are talking about here of supporting. So we've had a whole series of projects by now. We've run a number of global business plan competitions for young people from developing countries with ideas to start green businesses. And indeed, if you're a young person that wants to start a green business in a developing country, it's very difficult to get technical advice, to get financial advice. So we've run first these business plan competitions and found a lot of, well, we've run 4 cohorts of people that work on charcoal briquettes all the way to digital solutions for agriculture in different countries. Of course, just a business plan competition isn't enough. So our vision is that really we ought to then have accelerators and incubators. And for successful companies, there ought to be access to finance to a scale where they can actually reach out to commercial banks, to a scale where they are acceptable clients for the regular commercial system. So yes, we have a number of programs now funded by donors from the Pacific and the Caribbean to the Philippines, funded by the Qatar Fund for Development, funded by COICA, that take this further, that organize not just the business plan competition, but support for 2 years, all the way to modest funding, $50,000 for small companies that are promising. And that goes from the ag value chain in the Philippines to actually people setting up businesses in forested areas in Colombia, so that they don't cut down trees, but that they actually start to develop the non-timber projects, whether they're acai berries or other valuable products that the forest can offer, to help with nature-based solutions and livelihoods for indigenous people in those circumstances. Now, in a way, the final piece that I hope Mr. Wung-San An will say a bit more about is when you go to an even larger scale, those companies may be able to start to have joint ventures with larger international partners and may need to scale up. So the project that GGI collaborates on with the Korea Development Bank is to bring a much larger volume of funds, potentially as much as $100 million, to the most successful of those companies that are ready to scale up, to have joint ventures with Korean or other key companies and provide them funding from the KDB and the GCF to go to scale. So our role is mostly to do the demand side, to do the technology assessment in the 4-5 countries where we will be working, to make sure that we have the right local partners, to make sure that this is well embedded, that it's well aligned with government priorities, that it addresses the government's priorities for climate action, and then to hook this up to Korea's very strong innovation ecosystem. And I hope that Mr. Wung-San An is online to tell us a bit more about that.
Thank you, Frank, for setting the stage and also talking about the shift from the ground. There is more demand now for adaptation and ecosystem-based approaches, and really behoves upon us as the international community to create the ecosystem around them to make them successful. With that, I'm told that Mr. Wung-San An is now online, and we'll hear from him from the KDB's perspective, their excellent approach to the new innovation incubator accelerator that they're working on, as Frank mentioned. Over to you, Mr. An.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. I share my slide.
We see your slides, Mr. An, please.
Okay. Thank you. It's my honor to present the bank's prime technology transfer initiative to have virtual exchange with you all during COP26. KDB got PPF approval from the GCF in June. Afterward, we are working very hard with various partners, especially GGGI, to design and develop the program. Please, everyone see the program canvas that helps your understanding. KDB is willing to support Southeast Asian countries to formulate climate technology market and surrounding ecosystem. Specifically speaking, KDB will establish an investment fund of $100 million to provide investment capital for climate technology company after supporting them to have proper capacity with grant. The program is still under the designing process, but I'd like to briefly share two key concepts with you. First, we suggest an R&D collaboration amongst countries, institutions, enterprise, and individuals to meet and address needs of the 5 countries through climate technology transfer, uptake, and scale-up. Second, the program sees joint venture as a core instrument. KDB will foster the creation of joint venture as a sustainable business model in order to translate the concept into action, locally customized for effective diffusion and deployment of the climate technology. I'm not going to touch upon every single detail on this slide, but KDB will do its best to treasure the principle of country ownership and to benefit the very climate vulnerable group of the countries. I hope to showcase more later after PPF initiative, possibly with the GCF board of board. Thank you for your kind attention. And I'd like to make special thanks to Director General of GGI for his proactive support. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. An, for that quick overview of the work that you've begun to do. There's a long way to go, of course, as you've mentioned. This is just the starting, but thank you for sharing the start of this work with us. With that, we will now move on to Ms. Ramala Masuya from the CRDB Bank from Tanzania. We recently approved a project with them as the accredited entity for climate technology focused on agriculture. I'll now give the floor to Ms. Ramla Masuya to talk about their project. Mr. Ramla.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we do. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, GCF, for this session. My name is Ramla Masuya. I'm a Senior Manager, Sustainable Projects and Programs, responsible for overseeing implementation of climate action projects within CRBB Bank. I'm here today to represent our Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of CRDB Bank, Mr. Abdul Majid Sekela, who could not be able to make it due to other responsibilities of the organization. CRDB Bank is the largest commercial bank, financial service provider in Tanzania, which has presence in Burundi, and soon will also be present in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. We also have a CRDB insurance broker. Most important to note is that we are the country's largest lender to the agriculture sector, whereby we command about 45% of all credits to agriculture borrowers. And first and foremost, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude to Green Climate Fund for approving our funding proposal of USD $100 million for our Tanzania Agriculture Climate Adaptation Technology Deployment Program, TACA TDP. And this support from GCF is of paramount importance as there's a climate capacity gap and a need for support in climate resilience strategy to further the bank commitment to become a leading bank in climate and sustainable practices. So this program, which will benefit about 1.2 million directly farmers and 4.9 indirectly, to make a total of 6.1 total beneficiaries, will strengthen resilience of Tanzania agriculture sector by facilitating access to agriculture climate adaptation technologies and overcoming the major financial, regulatory, and technical barriers. So in relating climate innovation and technology in the implementation of our agriculture climate adaptation program, there are about 64 agriculture technologies and practices identified that can be incorporated into CRDB bank portfolio, which also aligns with the National Agriculture Adaptation and Sustainable Development Goals. And so some of the technologies that will be deployed in this program also aligns with our National Agriculture Sector Development Program, ASDP2, and the National Climate Smart Agriculture Strategy, which includes irrigations, drip irrigations, equipments, and fishing gears, etc., etc. So this GCF support will help us to move away from business as usual agriculture to agriculture resilience and climate adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramala, for giving us a glimpse into the project that CRDB will be implementing in Tanzania. And very, very exciting to know that Tanzania's, the CRDB is expanding beyond Tanzania to other countries. And hopefully some of these experiences from Tanzania can also be brought to other countries. We'll now finally turn back to bringing us all back to the room here to Mr. Jay Koh, the Managing Director of the Lightsmith Group, to talk a little bit about what they're doing. You've been a very vocal advocate of greater innovation and technology needs in the adaptation and resilience sector. So we'll hear from you about that, as well as your plans for the CRAFT project that was recently signed. Jay, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here in the GCF pavilion and to talk about the support that was just approved by the board of the GCF for the CRAFT strategy. So the CRAFT strategy is the Climate Resilience and Adaptation Finance and Technology Transfer Facility, and it's the first private investment strategy that's really dedicated to adaptation and climate resilience solutions that can then be transferred and deployed in developing countries. So Lightsmith Group is a sustainable private investment fund. We are a group of people that have backgrounds in traditional growth equity investing, but also a lot of focus and attention and experience in sustainable development and climate finance. And the goal of the CRAFT facility is really to find the best technologies for adaptation and climate resilience in developing countries and in other countries, to transfer them and apply them and scale them up into developing countries. So we're focusing on about 6 areas of technology. Agricultural analytics, because agricultural stress is a critical area that's been identified by the IPCC. Supply chain analytics. This is an area where there's disruption from weather events that are increasingly threatening the ability for us to actually manage economies. Digital mapping and geospatial information, fundamental technologies needed to understand how the risk of climate change will play out over different geographies, and the area of catastrophe risk modeling, and weather analytics. These are critical pieces of data that need to inform each of the societies that we live in as the situation in the environment becomes more complex. And it should be the case that the level of sophistication that's available in London or Glasgow or New York or Singapore is available in Jakarta and Dhaka and other parts of the world at the same level of resolution to enable those countries and those communities to make the decisions that they want to accelerate going forward. We're very fortunate to have the support of the GCF, up to $100 million, targeted at the countries of Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, Rwanda, the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, so both larger countries, low-income countries, and SIDS, who are incredibly vulnerable to climate change. And also at the COP this week, the U.S. government announced the launch of $2.5 million of technical assistance to support the CRAFT implementation alongside the €1.5 million from the Nordic Development Fund to accelerate the non-commercial deployment of those technologies, particularly into LICs and SIDS. So the commercial CRAFT strategy, which involves private sector investors alongside the EIB, AIIB, KfW, the Nordic Development Fund, the Government of Luxembourg, and the Rockefeller Foundation, will expand those technologies on a commercial basis and prove the case that you can make a return on investment in adaptation technologies, and therefore bring more capital into adaptation finance, which is sorely needed, but then to accelerate, to bring forward in time those technologies for LICs and SIDS. The technical assistance will be there to accelerate project preparation and deployment. I just want to leave you with one example of the kind of technology we're talking about. So one of the first investments that the Craft facility is focused on is in a company that produces solar hydro panels. These look like the form factor of solar electricity panels, but they have a proprietary material that takes the water vapor out of the ambient air and uses solar thermal technology to create pure drinking water. So instead of having to deploy simply solar electricity panels in the same places on rooftops, in large fields, in remote locations, completely sustainably and completely off-grid, these panels can generate 5 to 9 liters of pure drinking water under almost any atmospheric conditions in the world. So what this is an example, I think, of the kind of technology that we're really looking for, which is a transformational and systemic technology. It's not merely saying, let's make desalination 1 or 2% more efficient. It's the same analogy to saying we didn't take coal-fired power plants and try to reduce their carbon footprint gradually over time. We switched to an entirely different distributed system where the feedstock isn't hydrocarbons, it's water, it's the air, it's the sun. And so in this kind of situation, this technology enables you to try to replicate what we did in solar energy, to make it the cheapest source of electricity on the planet, in water, to drive down the cost of those things and accelerate the deployment of that technology across different developing countries as soon as possible. So I'd just leave you with 3 thoughts here at the end. The first is there is existing technology out there. GGGI, others that are out there are finding those technologies. They're matching them to the needs of the countries that are out there and the communities that are out there. And we can scale them up because we need to do that as quickly as possible, particularly in the adaptation and climate resilience area where the urgency of that problem is just becoming larger every day. The second point is we should be looking, again, for these kind of transformative and systemic technologies. So Naoko Ishii, the former CEO of the GEF, has said this: we can't look for incremental solutions any longer in adaptation, just as we're not looking for incremental solutions in the net zero transition. And then finally, the deployment of these technologies must be equitable. They must come not just to the people that can afford them in developed countries, but they need to be brought to the communities and LICs and SIDS and the vulnerable populations of developing countries as quickly as possible. So we're very excited about the opportunity to join with the GCF and accelerate the deployment of these technologies across these countries and other countries. It's also particularly exciting to know that this is an example of successful GEF-GCF cooperation. At COP23, the GEF announced a grant alongside of the NDF to begin the launch of the craft strategy, and now you can see the crescendo of that, where the GCF has come to try to scale up that activity and really engage the private sector in technology innovation and the transfer of that to developing countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay, for that, again, impassioned appeal for accelerating. The technologies do exist, especially in the resilient adaptation area, and how we can match the needs of the people to the finance and the models that need to make it work is where the gap is. So thank you so very much for your thoughts there. Without further ado, now that we've heard from all the speakers, I'll pose one question to each one of them, given the urgency of the need being expressed from the grounds up here. And I'll start with Jay, if you will, since you spoke last in the first round. Or what can organizations such as yourself do to accelerate actual deployment of the funds on the ground, because that's where the need is. Oftentimes, GCF gets criticized because of the slow implementation, and so we're looking at our partners to support that. And given the work that you've already done, sort of prime the pump for it here on the technology side, what mechanism do you think will help you accelerate implementation? First, Jane, then I'll turn to Frank, and then the 2 speakers on the Zoom. Thank you.
Well, I'd say two things are very important. One is being able to engage with the private sector is a critical area of focus for the GCF, and we've said this multiple times. The speed at which the private sector needs to act, and now the world needs to act. I mean, the Secretary General called a code red for civilization now. And so we need more efficient, more effective, more agile ways to interact with the GCF from the funding side of things. And I think then the deployment side of it needs to be dramatically accelerated by finding local partners in the local countries to actually help deploy the technology in those local areas. And that's why we really welcome the U.S. government and the Nordic Development Fund's launch of the Technical Assistance Facility to bring that technology even faster to LICs and SIDS, who usually are not the first target for commercial deployment of this technology. But make no mistake, if we cannot prove the commercial case for adaptation technology and mitigation technology, then the flow of capital that's required at the scale required to affect the transformation that is needed will not happen. And so proving that out by working with the private sector in an efficient way, in an effective way, where absolutely the requirements and objectives on the policy side of the GCF and other entities like this are met. But working with technology, especially entrepreneurship and capital, in a flexible way is critical to actually being successful. So we really look forward to working with the GCF in that way.
Thank you, Jay. You spoke about the need for building the pipeline and the ecosystem around it from the grounds up, and of course, about the policies and processes. Frank, over to you. Same question.
One, boots on the ground. We find that deploying 80% of our staff to work in country so they can actually be embedded in government offices is critical to speeding up processes. And yes, we are an active partner, delivery partner for GCF of the Readiness Program. We have now more than 30 countries that have made us their delivery partner. We have a portfolio of 50 projects, 35 of them approved, because we by now are able to push delivery more rapidly, right? And the other thing I think is being a bridge for us between international organizations and government and the private sector. Too many international organizations find it difficult to work with the private sector, and very few people in the private sector have the patience to deal with the UN or government, right? So we try to be an intergovernmental organization that is agile and flexible enough to work with the private sector as well as with government. There are not that many organizations that are able to bridge that gap. So those are my 2 points.
Thank you, Frank. You did bring a very good point to the surface here. And we've been told this, that even though we speak English, UN and the private sector, we don't speak the same English. So we do need intermediation and translation here. So thanks for bringing the point. We'll now have 2 of our speakers on Zoom to reflect on the same point. Ms. Ramala Masuya from CRDB Bank, what processes or plans you have in place for increasing the implementation and deployment speed fast? Over to you.
Thank you very much. In order to accelerate the deployment of the fund from GCF, I would like to urge the GCF to also consider acceleration of review and approval of the funding proposals, especially from the direct access entities. We all know how challenging it is to develop a funding proposal which meets the criteria of the GCF. And also I'll urge the GCF to consider providing also financial support in the preparation of the concept note, because we also need to speed up preparation of concept notes, good concept notes, which will end up to be a good funding proposal to the GCF. Thank you very much.
Ramala, if I may ask you to reflect a little bit more on, after the project is approved, how can implementation be accelerated? If you could reflect a few seconds on that.
Yeah, after the project has been approved, since we all know that it is new phenomena from the commercial bank. We used to have agriculture, which is business as usual. So the good thing is that with the concessional loan that we are getting from GCF of 70 million, the 20 million will be grant, whereby the 10 million will also help us as a grant for the insurance, but also the 10 million will be for the grant on the technical assistance, the capacity building. So the first thing that we will start is the capacity building to make sure that the farmers, the staffs of the bank, the community at large has got this knowledge of how to implement such climate adaptation resilience project in the country, because it's a new phenomenon to the country, whereby we used to have the normal business as usual agriculture.
Thank you, Ramala. Yeah, thank you. Again, you spoke the same need about what Jay did, the need for technical assistance to build the capacity on the ground to demand the right things and actually implement the right things. So thank you for that. Last but not least, Mr. Wusong, may I ask your reflection on how you see implementation on the ground can be speeded up? Over to you.
Thank you. I shall answer your question by exempling our climate partnership program. Addressed in my presentation, KDB will set about investment fund and 50% structured with a catalytic first instrument to be funded by the GCF. Cooking the program and tapping private investors, I witnessed them proactively responded truly. So KDB anticipates a successful mobilization of investment capital, leveraging the first growth equity from the GCF. This will accelerate this program speed up on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. An. I think we heard some very good points from our speakers. I wish the session was 2 hours long, and I wish all our panelists had that much time during this short time. But there's been excellent and very exciting discussion here. I think the key takeaways from the discussion has been from the public sector framing side of what the UNFCCC has mandated us. I think there's now greater collaboration and more coordinated collaboration between the technology mechanism, the CTCN, as well as TEC and GCF. We also heard examples of collaboration between GEF and GCF, and Jay talked about that as well. So this is exciting time. We are getting our act together and moving forward in this very critical time. We heard some great presentations and remarks from our partners, the executing entities and EEs, the accredited entities. That's the core of our GCF business model. We work through our partners, and they all are, I'm very excited that the focus has now shifted from mitigation to climate resilient adaptation. We have more people talking about it, and Jay raised this point. We cannot have a boom-bust cycles that we saw in the early stages of the solar boom and others to affect this. We don't have that time. So building the ecosystem, building the capacities on the ground as we go along, and reducing the capital inefficiencies by collaboration is the way forward. So thank you so very much. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to our speakers.